Ultima here. I'm going to give you another military presentation tonight. So this is going to be the next presentation on Canada in the First World War timeline. So this is the next presentation on this timeline of Canada in the First World War. I'm Aaron Boma, military specialist for Carleton County. So this is the first major engagement. This is the first engagement for the Second Canadian Division. So in the Second Canadian Division, they were of course the ones that amalgamated a lot of New Brunswickers in the 26th Battalion, as well as the Nova Scotia Rifles. So you have in the Second Canadian Division, um, the first formation so designated was a fully manned and equipped combat division which formed the initial contribution of the Canadian Expeditionary Force. A second iteration was raised for the Second World War. And of course, so the order of battle here in the First World War, of course, you have the 4th Canadian Brigade, which has the 18th Western Ontario Canadian Expeditionary Force, the 19th and the 20th that are 19th and the 20th are Central Ontario, whereas 18th is Western Ontario. The 21st Battalion is Eastern Ontario. The 5th Canadian Brigade, which is where we are as the 26th Battalion. The 22nd Battalion Canadian Francoise. Um, these are all units. These CEFs are created, in 1914, and most of them go until 1918 and onward. You have the 22nd Battalion Canadian Francoise, 1914, 1918. The 24th Victoria Rifles of Canada, and then you have the 25th Battalion, a sister battalion of the 26th Battalion, our Great New Brunswick Canadian Expeditionary Force. And the 25th Battalion was the Nova Scotia Rifles. Then you have the 26th Battalion, New Brunswick, and that's us. We're part of the 5th Canadian Brigade. So that's created November 2nd, 1914. November 11th, 1918 is when they were operating. But this unit had operated until after the First World War back in Canada, and then it dissolved, and then of course eventually Carleton Light Infantry and York Regiment before the Second World War joined to form the Carleton York Regiment. The 26th Battalion had a whole whack of different amalgamations across New Brunswick in it, and I will get to that, and I've gotten to that in other presentations. But tonight I want to focus on the St.Eloi. The 6th Canadian Brigade, the 27th Battalion, City of Winnipeg, 28th Battalion, Northwest, 29th Battalion, Vancouver, and the 31st Battalion of Alberta. So these are units, divisional units of the Royal Field Artillery, British Army, served under the 2nd Canadian Division until January 1916, when they were assigned to the 55th British Division. So the following units of the Royal Field Artillery, British Army, served under the 2nd Canadian Division until January 1916. That's the 1st West Lancashire Brigade, 2nd West Lancashire Brigade, 3rd West Lancashire Brigade, 4th West Lancashire Brigade Howitzer Brigade, and then you have the 5th Brigade Canadian Field Artillery and 6th Brigade Canadian Field Artillery. So, and some of these definitely saw action at Vimy Ridge and other major battles. Certainly the 26th Battalion did, and of course units like the 85th Canadian Expeditionary Force out of Nova Scotia, and numerous other units. So these here are some of they also have the Canadian Machine Gun Corps, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 14th Canadian Machine Gun Company. So that's just to show you the amalgamation of the 2nd Canadian Division, which Battle of St.Eloi is the first actual engagement for them. So, and that's what they are, and It's a big contingent of the Canadian Corps. So they recently arrived from England, and of course, this battle ended in disaster. Mud-filled craters and pretty much little cover. British forces had previously blown a series of underground mines to destroy the sector's German defenses, but the effort had left massive mud-filled craters for the attackers to occupy. When the Canadians relieved British troops on the night of April 3rd, they found few actual trenches in which to take cover, and most of these were waist deep in water. The entire front was also under observation and incessant fire from the Germans. The Battle of St.Eloi craters was fought from 27th of March to 16th of April 1916 during the First World War, or what we call the Great War. The attack over the soggy terrain of Belgium was the first major engagement for the 2nd Canadian Division, which is part of our Canadian Expeditionary Forces. It was a disaster for Canada and its allies. By late 1915, armies on both sides of the First World War were using extensive mining as part of trench warfare. Sappers dug tunnels across the battlefield to plant explosives under enemy positions and would then retreat and blow them up. The fields near the Belgian village of St.Eloi, located 5 kilometers south of Ypres, were pockmarked with craters from repeated underground explosions. In the spring of 1916, the Canadian Corps' 2nd Division was sent to fight Germans on the front at St.Eloi. The Canadians were rushed to the battlefield, leaving no time to prepare for the attack. The plan was for the seasoned British troops to strike and then for the Canadians to take over and hold the line. The fighting started at 4:15 a.m. on 27th of March with heavy gunfire. 6 British mines were set off, one after the other, shaking the earth like the sudden outburst of a volcano, and filling the sky with yellow smoke and debris, according to the Canadian Expeditionary Forces war records. The explosion was heard in England. German trenches collapsed. You can imagine, like what you see here, massive mines going off underneath, destroying German trenches. It's thousands of pounds worth of explosives. It is unbelievable. These mines created huge craters in no man's land. And as you see in the video, definitely this size, packing thousands of tons, hundreds of tons, if not thousands, underground to try to take out hundreds of pounds, thousands of pounds, rather. The British soldiers rose from their positions in the cold mud and attacked, quickly capturing 3 craters in the 3rd German line. For several days, British soldiers fought hand-to-hand with Germans, advancing until April 3rd. The British soldiers grew confused as to where they were, as the mines had reshaped the landscape. 4 mines blew up so close to each other that the craters formed an impassable lake that was 15 meters deep and 55 meters across. It was amazing. You'd have to have thousands of pounds, hundreds, if not thousands, probably thousands of pounds of ammunition, of high explosive, to set those off. I'd have to double check the figures. It later became a recreational fishing lake for a summer cottage. British troops fought from inside the craters, crouching in mud or standing in waist-deep water, unable to sit. High winds, sleet, and mud created nightmarish conditions. Hundreds of men were killed on each side in a week of chaotic shooting and shelling. The exhausted British were relieved by the Canadians at 3 a.m. on the 4th of April. So we entered the fray. The excited Canadians were eager for their first taste of battle, arriving at St.Eloi. However, they found a shortage of steel helmets, machine guns, and defensive positions. They had only a vague idea where they were and where the Germans were. The 2nd Canadian Pioneer Battalion improved the defenses and attempted to drain the trenches of water. At the same time, the entire front line came under constant bombardment. On the 4th and the 5th of April. Hundreds of more men were killed. Canadian Private Donald Fraser, a 34-year-old bank clerk from Calgary, described the scene. When day broke, the sights that met our gaze were so horrible and ghastly that they beggar description. Heads, arms, and legs were protruding from the mud at every yard, and dear knows how many bodies the earth swallowed. 30 corpses were at least showing in the crater, and beneath its clay waters, other victims must be lying killed and drowned. A young, tall, slim English lieutenant lay stretched in death with a pleasant, peaceful look on his boy's face. Some mother's son gone to glory. Frank Marx Malloth, sorry, I couldn't pronounce that right. Another Canadian wrote to his wife that we were walking on dead soldiers as they tried to advance. Wounded and traumatized men streamed back to the medical officers. Some had been fighting standing in cold water and mud for 48 straight hours, and officers had been awake for 100 hours. At 3:30 a.m., 03:30 a.m. on April 6th, two German battalions attacked down the ruins of the main road. The confused Canadian troops often lost communication with each other and were quickly pushed back. As the sun rose over the muddy wasteland, the Germans had recaptured all of the ground taken from them at the start of the battle. The Canadians fought back with bombs, but could not advance in the heavy rain. Troops attempting to recapture two craters got stuck in the mud and were shot dead before they could throw their grenades. A group of Canadians recaptured craters 6 and 7, but thought they were in craters 4 and 5. In the confusion, they were cut off and left open to the German onslaught. So as we were driven back, as on night fell on 8th of April, the Canadians again attacked, but were stopped by German rifles and machine guns. Incessant rain made porridge of the battlefield. Germans attacked the next day, but were likewise repelled. The Canadian leadership had little idea which craters they held and which were held by Germans. The leadership did not know what was happening at the front, as disoriented Canadians pinned down by artillery shells could not relay messages. Even the pigeons used to carry messages were dead. Both sides shot at each other in the miserable conditions of the craters for another 2 weeks. More than 1,370 Canadians were killed or wounded, along with about 480 Germans. Aerial photography on 16th of April finally showed the Canadians that they were in a terrible position, and the divisional headquarters ordered the battle stopped. Still, the German attack continued with tear gas. The exhausted Canadians fought off the enemy again on the 17th of April. A German night raid through pounding rain drove the Canadians back further. Mud stopped Canadian guns from firing. Half of the remaining men in the crater surrendered to the Germans, and half crawled away. And you can see here the vicinity that this is, St.Eloi, is to Ypres and to Montsoreau, which is another battle that I will talk about next in this timeline. And of course, looking at Hill 60 and Sanctuary Wood and Maple Corp. Those are all areas of well-known distinction in the history for Canadians and for British French and the history of this conflict. The Battle of St. Eloi's craters ended with the Germans in control of the battlefield, as they had been at its start. So this is here the position of from April 10, 1916, of the craters. So you can see here actual Canadian line and an actual German line. Crater 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6 and 7 here. So these are where the major mines were detonated opening day, and so Canadian lines. There's actual German lines, Canadian lines, and this is within a 300-yard range. This is the entire, in a sense, the whole battle area. Following the battle, Lieutenant General E.A.H. Alderson, which you've talked about numerous times, who was in charge of the Canadian Corps, was replaced with Sir Julian Bung. Vincent Bung of Vimy, which he would somewhat within the next 2 years certainly be known for. It was another couple of years before the Battle of Vimy Ridge, but this man became an infamous and very capable thorn in the German side. Bung had extensive military experience and served as a lieutenant colonel in the command of the South African Light Horse during the Second Boer War. Serving on the front lines and being mentioned in dispatches twice, by the time the First World War came along, Bung was a major general. He would serve with distinction at the Battle of Ypres in 1914 and Gallipoli in 1916. Field Marshal Douglas Haig would write to King George V after the dismissal of Alderson, writing, "I propose to recommend General Bung for the appointment. I think he will do it well and is sure to be most popular." Bung was shocked to receive command of the Canadian Corps, stating, quote, "Why am I sent to the Canadians? I don't know a Canadian." Bung's reforms and leadership, including using flexible tactics, played a major part in the victory at the Battle of Vimy Ridge. Bung would become extremely popular in Canada, and the Canadian Corps called themselves the Bung Boys. Canadian troops called themselves the Bung Boys. It could be argued that the appointment of Bung would mark a major turning point in the war for the Canadians, and that is very true. So this is the end of the Battle of St.Eloi in regards to Canada's role and whatnot. And we'll talk about the next battle coming up will be for the Canada in World War I timeline. The Battle of I'll take a look here. I've got a couple coming up. It's Mount Sorrel, so that's the next one. I want to tell you this before we go. Canada, in this battle, we suffered 1,373 casualties during the confused fighting at St. Eloi. Of course, this is I wouldn't say necessarily it's a reason why it is a failure. It is a failure of Alderson, yes, with the planning and the confused nature of this battle. And of course, the British want a more experienced and obviously a fresh commander to take charge, and so that was Julian Bung. It would only go uphill for Canada from there. A very experienced and respected British general to take control, while Alderson failed to seize the initiative here. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Aaron Boma, military specialist for Carleton County.